All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. So today we're talking about the Detroit Lions. The Super Bowl is actually today. Detroit should definitely be in it, but neither here nor there. I want to talk a little bit about the offseason because I remember a couple of days back seeing some potential targets for the Detroit Lions being Haason Reddick. And then we just saw earlier today that Haason Reddick is requesting a trade from the Philadelphia Eagles. And he is like an absolute beast, back-to-back Pro Bowl seasons. But the point is this: the Detroit Lions had such a good season, right? Very good. They now have back-to-back seasons being a top 5 offense. You just won the NFC North. You were a game away from making the Super Bowl. Like, folks, you are in the conference championship here. Yes, the Detroit Lions have holes, most of them being on the defensive side. They gave up just a little over 23 points per game. That is bottom 10 in the National Football League. I'm looking at like the cornerback position because they got absolutely shafted with injuries to players like Emmanuel Mosley, CJ Gardner-Johnson got injured. You have newbies, young cats, guys like Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph holding it down. They also need an edge rusher. They also need a guard. But to be quite honest with you, Detroit, I do expect them to make a big time splash. A couple of days ago on this channel, we were talking about trading for Joey Bosa, and I hated the trade package. It was like giving up a first round draft pick. But it would actually shock me if Detroit drafted where they are currently slated to draft, which is the late first round. And what I mean by that is it would not shock me in the slightest if they trade up for it, which we'll talk about in today's video. And it would not shock me if they just traded away, which we'll talk about in today's video. Now, we have to keep in mind, Brad Holmes is a phenomenal draft evaluator. Like, this guy knows how to have a draft. But the point is this: the Detroit Lions need a couple of tweaks on the defensive side. And I want to talk about Haason Reddick. I want to talk about a couple other potential trades, a couple of other potential free agent acquisitions. And that's what we're talking about in today's video. But before we do, if you guys enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content, along with many Lions videos every single week. Lions fans, if we try and get this video to 500 likes, it would mean the absolute world to me. So like I was saying a couple of days ago, we were looking at players. I was looking at some players in trades that Detroit could potentially look at. And we were looking at Charvarius Ward, Joey Bosa, their first round draft pick. And then we have Haason Reddick. The secondary, I think, has a ton of talent. I think guys like Aleem McNeil, James Houston's injury all season kind of complicated their defensive line room. But Aiden Hutchinson's a star. He's a rising superstar in the National Football League, but he's currently at least a star. And the dude had a phenomenal sophomore season. And the Detroit Lions linebacker room and defensive line room actually had a really solid playoffs. They had 8 total sacks in 3 games, which led the NFL, and they were getting to the quarterback. But I still feel, and this is something we were talking about closer towards trade deadline day, we were looking at guys like Chase Young, which I'm glad they didn't end up acquiring. We were looking at guys like Brian Burns. We were looking at Montez Sweat before the Bears acquired him. Like, the Detroit Lions, if you throw another like elite level, star level edge rusher on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson, they're going to not only make each other better, but they're going to make everybody else better. Because you have to, imagine I have actually Haason Reddick on the other side of the edge. Well, you can't really double team Aiden Hutchinson every single time now, because I've got Aleem McNeil down there getting to the quarterback, and I've got Haason Reddick getting down to the quarterback. So let's just briefly talk about if Haason Reddick actually joined the Detroit Lions. So he made the Pro Bowl this season. He made an all-pro team last season, as well as a Pro Bowl. 2 years ago in 2022, he played, and by the way, in the last 2 seasons, because this was a big issue when we were talking about a Joey Bosa hypothetical trade, Haason Reddick has played every single game for the last 2 seasons. In fact, he's played every single game in his entire NFL career. So 2 years ago, he had 5 forced fumbles. He had a ton of quarterback hits, 26 quarterback hits to be exact. He had 16 sacks. And the dude was a monster. And so they move him to outside linebacker this past season, and he continues to be a monster. 11 total sacks. He had 23 total quarterback hits. He made another Pro Bowl. But in his last 4 seasons, Haason Reddick has had double-digit sack numbers. So, if I were to go out there and make an actual trade for him from the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm not expecting that 2022 season where he made the All-Pro second team and had 16 sacks and had 5 forced fumbles. But if I get what he did last season, which is 11 total sacks, 23 total quarterback hits, that elevates the Detroit Lions defense completely just by that move itself. But once again, it's kind of like a yin and yang where he's only going to complement your current roster. And we've seen guys like Melo Fonwu and Brian Branch and even Alex Anzalone get to the quarterback at various points throughout the season, various points throughout games. And I just think they're still missing that edge rusher. And, I understand, man. It doesn't really seem to me like the Detroit Lions would make a stupid, silly move if we're talking about trades. And we talked about Joey Bosa a couple of days ago, and that does seem like a kind of silly, goofy, very risky move from the Detroit Lions and Brad Holmes. But when I go back and I think to myself in free agency last season, they picked up C.J. Gardner-Johnson. And this guy brings a certain edge. He brings a certain intensity to the Detroit Lions defense and specifically their secondary. The only issue is he barely played. The dude got injured pretty much as the season began, so we didn't see too much C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but trust me, man, that was going to be a huge pickup. It already was in the minimal amount of games that he ended up playing. Like, he played 3 regular season games for the Detroit Lions this season. 3. And I do think Brad Holmes would be open to the idea of trading for a guy like Haason Reddick to just get that defense over the top. Now, a couple of other players that we saw in specific articles and talking points and all that stuff are guys like Charvarius Ward, Haason Reddick, Joey Bosa. But that first round pick is intriguing. And I saw a hypothetical trade because keep in mind the Detroit Lions have an extra 3rd round draft pick this season thanks to the TJ Hawkinson trade from a while back. And here was a hypothetical trade. And I don't love this particular trade, but I think it's close to something that they would do if they were to actually trade up. And it was their 2024 first round pick. It was a 2024 second round pick. And then you have that 2023 third round pick that was from the TJ Hawkinson trade. And you would trade that to the New Orleans Saints and you would acquire the 14th pick overall. And you would probably take a player like Alabama cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry. And so the point is this, whether they, trade up and take Kool-Aid, whether they just take Kool-Aid at their current pick, if they draft an edge rusher, if they, sign an edge rusher, if they trade up for an edge rusher, it doesn't matter. Brad Holmes is going to make some type of systematical, methodical move that changes a lot, just like he did picking up C.J. Gardner-Johnson last season. And whether that's through the draft, whether that's free agency or the trades, that remains to be seen. But the point still stands, man. This Detroit Lions team is special. You just made the conference championship for the first time in an eternity. You just won the NFC North for the first time in eternity. You just won a couple of playoff games for the first time in quite some time. So, Detroit's right there. They're not going anywhere. I got Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson staying home in Dan Campbell's coaching staff, and I think a big move is coming. So let me know your thoughts on trading for Haason Reddick. Let me know your thoughts on trading that first round pick. Let me know your thoughts on just trading for a player at Haason Reddick's level. Thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and we'll see you next time.